Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues episode 53. Everybody's favorite governor, I'm sure you're a fan of him if you're watching this and like this channel, Phil Scott has formed a marijuana legislation commission. Haha. See, that'll solve the problem. Phil Scott is sort of doing what Shumlin did with regards to single payer. Now I'm sure that this commission will include drug warriors, just like Peter Shumlin had Jonathan Gruber aboard to advise on the feasibility of single payer within the state. The state government loves to do this. Phil, can I give you some sage advice? The majority of the population of Vermont wants to see it legalized. Even a lot of those that honestly they're saying like, oh, maybe not, just keep it decriminalized. They're smoking it. Either they've tried it or they're smoking it regularly. So don't let them fool you. There are very few moralists in this state. Most people have tried marijuana, didn't fuck up our lives. If anything, legal substances did, or opiates, something they were prescribed by their doctor. So there's that. The judiciary has no problem with it. The legislature is overwhelmingly in support of it, and you vetoed the legislation. You said you wouldn't pass it. You are the only person at this point in this state that has a problem with this issue. I don't know why you have a problem with it. It would bring in revenue. It would help us refocus policing efforts on the opiate crisis to try to take out some dealers on that front and try to, why don't you use the state's resources to crack down on the prescribing of painkillers or something? Give them marijuana. Hell, they'll forget all about their pain when they're higher than balls. When they're higher than Harlem, they won't care anymore about that post-surgery pain. It'll do a lot less damage to them. If they get addicted, who cares because it's already decriminalized? And they're probably not. 1 in 100 people gets kind of chemically addicted to marijuana. A few more get habituated to it. A lot easier to quit. I quit it. I quit smoking marijuana many years ago, and I feel just fine. I don't need it. It just gives me anxiety attacks anyway. I'd much prefer some good old caffeine. But if people want to smoke it, well, who cares? Now, Phil's side, I guess, is, well, we need to study the potential impact on the state. Why don't you just look at Colorado and Washington State and Alaska and D.C. and all these other areas that have already legalized it? Do you see any massive looming social issues, or are they running a significant amount of revenue as the result of legalizing and imposing a small tax? Now, there's no such thing as a small tax in Vermont, so the weed's going to be overpriced. Just don't go down the Ohio route and try to hoodwink people into getting corporate weed, and let them grow a couple plants. Let them grow some for their own use. Then they're not buying it from some sketchy dealer. They're smoking it or they're sharing it with their friends. There, problem solved. Very small tax per plant or something like that. I wouldn't even tax it. If I were in charge, I would tell the legislature, I want you to just pass legalization, say people can smoke it, they can grow a few plants. Unless it's like they've got a whole crop field full of marijuana, then you're going to need to get a license. You're obviously selling it. If it's a couple plants, who cares? Really, don't we have bigger issues to talk about as a state? Like, oh, we need better paying jobs. Our tax rates are high. The tourists might go away if we fall into another recession. Things get more dilapidated. We can't quite make ends meet. Phil Scott managed to run a balanced budget, which is to his credit. I'll give him credit for that. But he should have lowered the tax rate and slashed out a couple bureaus, gutted them, or something to that effect. We've got other things to talk about as a state. People smoking weed is not a problem. They're smoking it anyway, Phil. You do realize it's already decriminalized. A lot of people in Vermont, probably, I would say a good quarter of the state's population is getting high on a regular basis. People go to work high. Doesn't seem to impact them too badly. People drive high. I don't support that. It's still a DUI, by the way, but, it's not as impairing as alcohol, potentially. Is it really that different from having a cup of coffee and a cigarette while you're going out to drive? Yeah, I think it probably impairs you about the same amount. As somebody who did smoke it semi-regularly for several years in the past, does it seem to have screwed up my mental faculties? No, Phil, it didn't. Now, I know you might be a total boring dude, and you're like Clinton, so, obviously you've encountered marijuana. Okay, so you smoked it but didn't inhale or something like that. Okay, we understand. Don't worry, yeah, you didn't inhale it. You're not like it wasn't like that was the point, like with Obama. At least he was honest about that, one of the few things I can give him credit for. Phil Scott, though, on a lot of other issues, he's like basically a rhino. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to lower the tax rate. I condemn Trump for this remark. DC is screwed up and stuff like that. Then on this, he decides to go far right. Oh, I'm not so sure that legalizing the devil's weed is a good idea. Come on, get your head out of the reefer madness toilet for a minute. Look around at the world around you and realize that a lot of the, Phil, probably some of your staff and a lot of people in the legislature are also smoking marijuana. You do realize this, right? Just because you haven't encountered them in the bathroom toking up doesn't mean they're not doing that. Hell, we've had a president who openly smoked marijuana. Now we've got a teetotaler president, supposedly. I think he has a glass of champagne once in a while. Doesn't really consider that to be a problem. I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, come on. We don't need a commission for this. We don't need to pay a bunch of eggheads to tell us what we already know. Yeah, marijuana is like the least of your worries. Tens of thousands of people in your state are addicted to opiates. Yeah, it's causing property crime left and right. Yeah, it's starting to blight some neighborhoods. Just ignore all that. We're too focused on this weed stuff that's been around forever, that people used to smoke regularly anyway. Before the temperance era, people were smoking marijuana. Yeah, they were high. Yeah, people during the Enlightenment were pretty high. They also were drunk. They seemed to manage to make a stable society, and they still managed to write books and go to school and delve into philosophy. In fact, it probably helped that they were a little bit high and drunk when they were reading the ancient classics. Gave them some good ideas, I guess. This country turned out okay. So what are you so worried about? I just don't understand the moralism, especially from the Phil Scott administration. When we're thinking about any other issue, it's like, yeah, I'm going to side with the Democrats. I'm going to go to the left. Yeah, you elected me to stand against this sort of stuff. It's sort of like a Loris and Dave Allaire situation, like a macrocosm of it here in Rutland. You know, we kicked him out specifically because of those issues, and nobody cares about weed. Why don't you just put it before a Democrat? Why don't you introduce the idea of ballot initiatives fully in the state of Vermont? Because we're one of the few states, I think, that doesn't do this. And let people have a democratic vote. Do you want marijuana legalized, yes or no? You know, the yeses will have it. Probably by an enormous proportion, probably be a 70-30 at worst. So why are you standing in its way? You're supposed to be the arbiter, the executor of the legislative will, and they represent the public will. Well, the public has spoken. The legislature has spoken. You're standing in its way. You're the only person who thinks that that's a good idea. You've got other things to worry about. You've got other jobs to do than sit there racing stock cars and dragging your feet on an issue that a lot of Vermonters find important. This could be a niche industry for the state of Vermont anyway. You slap Vermont on the label of some edibles, they're immediately worth twice as much. Who cares? Let the tourists come and get high. Yeah, they're going to get high anyway. That's the sort of why some of these people already come to Vermont to get high. Don't kid yourself all day. They're not all coming to look at leaves. Or if they do, half the time, they're high when they're looking at them. Makes the colors go really, really pretty. They go skiing. Some of them are high. Most of them are drunk. What's the problem? No, Vermont, we always talk about, even Phil's done this. Oh, Vermont breweries, we've got so much beer, now we've got distilleries, we've got wineries, we've got all this wonderful stuff. So you take pride in the fact that Vermont gets people drunk, potentially far more impairing, far more addictive, far more physically harmful, by the way, and of course, alcohol should be legal for adults to consume. You don't have a problem with this, Vermont exporting beer, or whiskey or something like that. You don't have a problem with it. Wine, yeah, wine is fine. Liquor is quicker. And beer, never fear. As soon as it turns to marijuana, oh no, kids might get a hold of it. You know, the kids might get a hold of a bottle of Magic Hat as well. And it's probably not going to ruin their lives. You may think that, like, I know there's a big moralist thing, like, where the police will get you. You better be paranoid because you've got a joint. Come on. Half their bad trips, half the bad decisions that are made on drugs anyway are the result of paranoia because there's a drug war. You realize that too, right? People won't go for harm reduction. They don't want anyone else to know. Jimmy's doing drugs. Oh no, better not tell my friends. They'll out... You know, on TV, back in the 90s, they used to say if you smoked weed, all your friends would turn their backs on you, you'd be homeless. No wonder they kept it a secret for so long. Then they realized that wasn't really the problem, but then they got prescribed pills for surgery, and they kept that a secret too. When they started wanting more and more Vicodin or oxycodone or something like that. You created this problem. Government did. It wasn't some random person creating it. It wasn't even drug pushers creating the problem. It's a bunch of pharma companies and doctors and psychiatrists and people in government and policing. And the police, by the way, have to bear the brunt of the burden anyway. They have to go out and enforce this fucking drug war. They have to go be the ones to knock on someone's door at 3 a.m. worrying if they're about to get their head blown off because they got a call that somebody smelled like marijuana. It's about time we just end this. Fuck the federal government. If they're concerned about policing marijuana on the federal level, let them waste their time. We should shield the people of this state from that sort of stupid policy. This should also extend, by the way, further than weed. It should extend all drugs. Decriminalize them all and get people into treatment. I'd rather see someone who they were prescribed opiates years ago, now they're a heroin junkie or something. Get them help. Your responsibility, and it shouldn't even be the taxpayers paying for it, by the way. Sell some government property off to pay for these programs instead of putting the burden on the taxpayers. Sell off some public property. Pay for it that way. Why haven't we tried that? Why haven't we considered that a possibility yet? I shouldn't have to pay for it. The government should. You're the ones that cause a fucking mess. If Phil Scott sits there, oh, we're going to form a commission. Stop dragging your heels. You know full well you're going to stack it with people who are in favor of the drug war anyway. That's sort of the point. They're going to advise you officially. They're going to tell the Vermont people, oh, it'll cause little kids to smoke pot. You know what? I would rather see little kids smoking pot than little kids getting thrown into juvenile detention or jail for doing it because it's illegal still. I would much rather see that. I don't really care. Yeah, let them get their fix. It's not really going to hurt them long term any more than stealing their dad's beer or something like that. Cigarettes are a different story. That probably will screw them up. Those are legal. You can go to any gas station, get a pack of smokes, and get some beer. Go get some wine, go to the liquor store. Yeah, that's just fine. Phil doesn't have a problem with that. Vermont liquor is wonderful. Go get drunk, everybody. Yeah, because it's going to be cold soon. There won't be anything else to do. Get drunk and go shovel your driveway. Just don't get high. Phil Scott says it's a bad idea. It's very, very naughty to do so. That's about all. Peace out.